Good evening. My name is Matt Lappa, and this project is for the Education 579 Advanced Topics course, summer 2019 at Baldwin Wallace University. The topic tonight is high leverage practices, in particular, collaborations. To start, we have to determine what high leverage practices, or HLPs, are in the first place. What high leverage practices are the steps that educators can take that allow for the students with special needs to be able to succeed in school. There could be all sorts of different steps, and we'll cover some of them briefly in the next couple of minutes. But basically, these are high intensity and consistent and constant levels of education that students can use in school and then apply to real life situations later on if they need to. There are 4 types of HLPs, which include the following. The first set are collaboration, followed by assessments, social, emotional, and behavioral, and instructional higher level leverage practices. For collaboration, you have the step where, very simply, parents, the teachers, the administration, other professionals who may work with the students. It could be anywhere from someone who works at the lunch line to custodial staff to crossing guards to psychologists to whomever. But they're all working together to develop the plans that best benefit the students. And then over the course of the goals that are set, these people then can get together and ensure that those goals are being met. The second section is assessments. These are the high frequency and consistent assessments of varying types, which will determine what the students' weaknesses are, their strengths are, what needs to be developed. And in this case, you want to use a great number of different assessments in order to get as broad of a sense that you can over what the students' needs are. You also have to be able, with assessments, to be able to gather good solid data to be able to use later on. The social, emotional, behavioral section of HLPs is where you're trying to develop a solid, structured environment for the students. You want an environment that's fair, firm, and consistent. You want something that is structured enough so that the student knows what to expect every day, which tends to be more beneficial for students in the classroom instead of a chaotic atmosphere. This tends to lead to greater success for the students later on. And then finally, instruction. What are you going to use to instruct the students? How are you going to be able to do so? For this particular HLP, you want instructors, the different staff members, special ed and general ed teachers, along with whomever else may be working with the student, to know what the various content standards are. You want the general content standards. You need to know what is required by the state that you're in for the student. You want to be able to focus on the goals and the benchmarks and objectives for the IEPs that are written for the student. You want to be able to follow all these things with frequency and with intensity to ensure that the student is getting what's best required for them. First assessment question that I have then is, what are the 4 high leverage practices in education? So take a minute, pause the video if you need to, and if you're watching this with others, go over with those other people what are the 4 steps and what entails each one. Now, what I'm mainly focusing on with this presentation is collaboration. And collaboration, as we noted before, is going to be consisting of the meetings between various staff members, the meetings between staff and parents, and then the follow-up meetings with parents to determine what's being done, what needs to be met. So this is broken up into 3 parts. HLP 1, and I should say all of these HLPs right now, 1, 2, and 3, go with the collaboration portion. HLP 1 is when you're collaborating with other professionals to best provide for the success of the students. HLP 2 is the planning and running the meetings between the parents and the school staff. You're finding out what the parents have to say about it, and possibly even what the students have to say. HLP 3 is then working with the families once the first 2 steps have been implemented, especially with the HLP 2, to determine if you are or are not providing the proper supports and the proper services for the students. And this step is very important because are you meeting the goals? Are you not meeting the goals? What could you be doing that will ensure that the student achieves the goals set for him or her more quickly? How will they be able to retain the information that's provided to them more easily? Now, the first part of the HLP process is you want the efforts of everybody toward the building of a thorough and effective set of goals for the students. You want strategies that are going to work for the students as best as possible. You want to meet the requirements necessary for providing that student who has special needs with the best possible education. Now, you can get, and I mentioned this earlier, but this is just a continuation of it. You can get all sorts of people involved in this process. These parties, these professional parties, but also family members, can include the actual parents or guardians of the students, the general education teachers, the special education teacher of the students, any paraprofessionals that might be involved, school administration that might be involved, school psychologists, psychologists that the students may see outside of the school setting, the students' doctors, any behavioral specialist or licensed social workers. And again, you can even include the student themselves with this process, because especially as they get older, usually around age 13 or 14, the student needs to become more and more involved in determining what may or may not be of benefit for them. So who takes part in this first step? Well, HLP 1 is the actual professional collaboration step for these higher leverage practices. So again, I mentioned some of these a minute ago. But again, these are the professionals that are taking part in this process. These will often be the initial people who meet together and look over what needs to be done. These may be the teaching staff, the paraprofessionals, the administration team, the psychologists, the guidance counselors, even school coaches, and again, like student cleaning staff. Anybody who has knowledge of that particular student and can observe that student can be part of this, as long as they're all coming together and working to build solid, effective goals that the student can reach and that are also challenging to the students. Now, under HLP 1, the staff will work together to develop what they find to be the needs of the students. They will get together and usually collaborate within the school setting itself. Before school or after school meetings are usually the easiest time, but sometimes you may do it during the lunch break or personal break or planning period. And during this time, as you're determining the needs, you get together with the other staff. You all work together to find out what the needs of the particular student are and how each of you think they can be addressed. And once that is done, you can come together and work together and prioritize the needs as necessary. Or if you have those needs prioritized, what's the best approach to take to meet those needs? You want to do this with all these different people because everybody has individual observations for students. The way I might see a teacher, the way I might see a student within my classroom may not necessarily be the same as a student in a different classroom. If I'm teaching social studies and the kid likes my subject area, I may see a good attentive kid who focuses on the skills necessary and may just have some mild needs in terms of, say, editing skills when I'm having him write a small paper on a history topic. In an English classroom, however, the teacher may not see the same thing. They may see a student who not only struggles with editing, but sometimes struggles with writing, particularly if the student finds the topics covered in that classroom to be less interesting to them or more challenging somehow. So you want to get from everybody who interacts with these kids the good and the bad, and it can be the academics, it can be behavioral, it can be social interactions with the teaching staff and with peers, which can vary widely from classroom to classroom or school setting to school setting. You want to find out what the student enjoys. What do they not enjoy? What are they willing to do that might challenge them if they enjoy the topic versus what they might be unwilling to do if it's easier but they don't like the topic. You have to take all these things into consideration, and that's one of the main reasons you want to have these collaborations with other professionals. You also want to go into this with what instructional strategies have worked in the past. What instructional strategies have not. Some will work from one year to another. A student who likes making presentations in classes might find it easier to present all of their work as a presentation. Maybe they're very social and they like to get up and talk about the work that they've had to do. However, a kid that does well in science class with those presentations may not want to do that for an English presentation, maybe because he or she likes science better than they like English, or they feel that they struggle, and those struggles can make them feel they can lead to a lack of confidence. The bottom part here, you want to share ideas. What ideas have you tried in the classroom that have worked or haven't worked? And you want to share those with the other staff member on this collaborative team. You also might ask others for ideas that you haven't tried. Maybe you're struggling with the student in the classroom. Somebody has something that they could present to you. Or you may be in a better position to attempt a new idea for a student, present a new idea to a student than another person who may have a great idea but may just not be in the same situation where they can work with the student in the same way that you do. Now, the higher leverage practice 2 is the section where you're meeting with both families and staff members. Now, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, families of students with special needs have rights, which include being part of their students' education. And this is a big part of this collaboration effort for HLP2. You want to bring the parents in, all right? You want to know what the parents know about their students because they see them in a totally different setting. A student who's able to get work done at school may have a greater difficulty getting that same work done when they're at home, or vice versa. And so, since parents tend to know their children the best, they're often in the best position to make suggestions that can benefit that child in terms of their educational needs. Now, they may not have the knowledge on how to do so, but they can make suggestions very easily on what seems to work from past interactions with teachers in previous school years, what types of setting at home work well or do not work well for their students, which can then be applied to the school setting, and again, vice versa. They can give you a good sense of that student's social and emotional needs or any behavioral issues that may develop during this time, because what staff members will often see in school may be wildly different from what parents will see at home. A kid who socializes in school may not socialize with others at home very often. And a kid who is great at home behaviorally may be running roughshod over the classroom. So you want to be able to talk with these parents. Sometimes there's a good common meeting ground that you can meet in terms of what should be done. And you want to explore as many options during this time as you possibly can. Now, your initial meetings for these collaborations, let's say your main goal is to set up an IEP or the 3-year ETR. You want to send home things that the parents can look over. They should be able to know what their rights are. You should be able to provide them. The school should be able to provide them with potential assessments that the parents themselves can look over and say, hey, this is what my child seems to be good at academically. This might be their strongest class. This may be their weakest class. These are the social issues that my student has had in the past. This is what I would like to be able to work on. But you want to get this information from the parents well ahead of time so that as you're building toward this IEP and setting up those goals for the upcoming school year, you have the ability to revise new ideas, shared potential ideas that then one side or the other can then mull over and say, hey, this looks like it could work, or this one, I'm not so sure, maybe we can try this in the future. But your whole point is you're meeting together ahead of time, and then when you get to the actual IEP or ETR or whatever plan it is you're working on, everybody should be on the same page in terms of the goals, the agenda that they have for the students for the upcoming year. Now, these meetings, when they're set up, and you can have multiple meetings over the course of a school year for all of this, initial meetings, actual IEP meetings or 504 meetings, follow-up meetings to see how well the student's doing. They can all be organized through phone calls, emails, and notes home to the student if you know that you can give a note to your students and make sure that they will give it to their parents, which of course does not always happen. I've known teachers who also will sometimes text their parents. That can be a very useful tool. You just have to be careful about when you're giving out your home number for text or personal phone call or personal number for phone calls. You do have to be aware, and you may have to set up rules to follow for the parents to not call you at all hours of the day and night. I made the mistake of doing this before, and while it is helpful to be able to contact the parents when you need to, even if you're not at the school, I've gotten phone calls as early as 6:30 in the morning, well before the school day started, and messages that came well after the school day ended, and that can be a little bit tough. But usually a phone call from school or emails tends to be the easiest way in this day and age to get in touch with parents. You also want to arrange meetings at a time and place that's suitable for both parties. The school setting is usually the best as long as you, the teacher, or the administrator are setting it up at a time that you can get as many team members to the meeting as possible to meet with the parents. And you're going to have to work around staff work schedules, parent work schedules, sports that the staff may coach, and also just the regular fact that staff have lives too outside of school. And so if the school day ends at 3 o'clock, there may be times when a staff member has to stay until 5 to meet up with a parent who works later or can't get out any earlier. But the parents also need to realize that they can't always meet at 7 o'clock at night on a Sunday night with a teacher. Both parties have to understand that flexibility is important here. Now, when you're having these actual collaboration meetings, you need to agree upon numerous things. First, you need to have a clear agenda of what steps you're going to take during the course of the meeting. We're going to talk about this, and this. At the end, if we have any questions, we can cover those areas, any concerns, things like that. But you want to stay on topic, and you want to be able to come back to topic. I've seen both teachers and parents get way off topic for meetings and start discussing their personal lives or the lives of their kids outside of school. And while that can be helpful sometimes you really have to be clear on being able to steer the meeting back on the course. But basically, some of the things you want to be able to cover during this time include: what are the strengths and weaknesses that are agreed upon by both the parents and the professional team at school? What is the student good at? What are they not good at? What can we work on most easily with them to bring their ability level up? Are we going to have to spend more time on reading comprehensive skills or reading fluency skills to get them up to grade level? Can we not focus as much on certain math skills? Have they developed over time? So we can still focus on them, but they can be more of a low priority. You want to ask, what does the parent want for the child from the school? And what does the staff at the school want from the parent to be able to do? When you can, you want to ask the child, or determine from the child, what are they willing to work towards with in terms of their future? Are there goals that they have? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to go directly to the workforce? Do they want to go to a trade school? Do they want to go into the military? And you can work with all these different factors with the student, especially when they get older. Usually the early teens and the point where they're hitting high school is where you really want to bring them into this whole process of transition and goal making. What are both parties willing to do to help the students, both at school and at home? You need to make sure that both parties are willing to work with the school at home, that parents will follow up with what they say they're going to do, and at school, that the teachers, that the administration, that the school itself is going to follow up with what they say they're going to do. You want to ask maybe what parents have seen worked in past years that could potentially be applied to modern or to the current era. You want to continue and determine what types of communication work best between the staff and the students. And furthermore, if there's an issue that comes up, if there are questions that come up, if there's some kind of a setback where the students seem to be making solid progress for a lengthy period of time and then all of a sudden come to a sudden stop, can you communicate quickly and easily between both parties, determine what the problem is, and if there's a solution to it. Now, HLP 3 is the final step in this process, and during this, you want to work together to help the student. By this point, you've probably set up the goals on the IEP, you set up the plan for the 504, you set up whatever issues, or you've set up plans and goals for whatever issues that you think may arise, and you want to stay in touch with each other. You want to make sure that you still have that good communication, that even though we have the goals in place, are we meeting those goals? Are we making sure that the needs established during the meeting, during the second stage, the HLP 2 stage, are they being met? This is also the point where you have to take into consideration, and you also would do this during earlier stages as well. And this can be uncomfortable sometimes, but it's necessary for the students. You have to take in all the different factors of the students and their situation, their background, their prior schooling, any issues they may have had with teachers, or home issues. For example, are the parents divorced? I taught at a school where close to half the students, probably more than half of the students, lived with one parent, or one parent and a step-parent. So you need to know, was the divorce amicable? Who does the student live with? Who does the student, if there's a split or a joint custody, sometimes one student will do more for one parent at home in terms of their academics than another. You need to know those issues if possible. You want to know what the socioeconomic status of the family is. A lot of times you can find that from school records. But it's also important to know, is that student homeless? Are they living with a different family member other than a parent? Is rent a constant problem at their household? Do they always have a safe place to live, even if they do live in a house or an apartment with family members? Do they have enough to eat, which can be a major impactor on student success in schools, especially when we see more and more that students at schools, sometimes the only meal that they get in a day might be breakfast or breakfast and lunch at the schools that serve both. Do they have adequate clothing during different months of the year? You know, is this a student who's going to walk to school every day and not have a good winter jacket, or never have an umbrella and come in after a fall or a spring rain freezing because they just walked a couple miles in the rain? You want to make sure that all these are met, because all of these can determine how well a student does in school. Other factors to consider include, if the school helps set up a new program for the student, are they able to actually implement that program? If assistive technologies such as certain types of hearing aids, or the school helping out with providing for a wheelchair for the students, are those accessible for the school to easily get? If there's an issue with those technologies, for example, if they need a repair, is the school going to be able to provide those repairs or fixes when necessary? You also want to know, are there currently any family members, or family issues, I should say, that this family needs to be aware of? I've seen divorced parents where one parent had complete custody and the other one was not allowed to see the parent, and the parent still wanted to show up to school to pick the student up out of the blue. Are there any medical issues, any health issues with the parents? Is one in the hospital and the kid's constantly worried about their family because of that? Even the death of not just a family member, but a pet can have an impact upon the students and their mood for the day, their emotional status for that particular day. Is there a sudden financial issue? You know, sometimes things can be going well, and then one or both parents might suddenly lose a job. and going from the standard that you're seeing every day to, oh my gosh, we may not have enough food to eat tomorrow, has a profound impact on students. You definitely want to learn about any cultural differences that a student may have. Is their family from this country or not? Even if they are, is English their first or second language? I've known numerous students who English was a second language, and they could speak conversational English very well. But in terms of instructional English, they weren't always sure. So you could explain something, and they would say, "Oh yeah, I understand, I get it," and then have no idea what you're talking about. And many of the students that I've worked with over the years in Spanish-speaking communities have also required that they might be able to speak English, but need a translator for their parents in order to understand. And is the translator available when you need one? And there are many times, especially if you're going to be having an IEP meeting, you need to have somebody who can translate for you in those situations. Finally, are the students able to ask for help when there is an issue? Older students are usually better at self-advocacy, but not always. Some of them were not taught the skill. Some of them are very shy and need to be able to speak up for themselves and to share what issues or needs that they may have. So they need to be able to have the training for these things. Now, my second assessment, and again, you can pause this if you need to, but what are the 3 parts of the high leverage collaboration process, and what does each one entail? So in conclusion, collaboration is the higher level practice that starts and ends the education process for most students who have special needs. I say this because this collaboration process is ongoing throughout. Before you set up any goals whatsoever, you're going to have people, professional staff, and meetings with parents that have to set up and determine what the needs are of the students. Later on, set up the goals that are going to be that these staff and the parents are going to try to achieve, what needs are going to be met and how they're going to be met. And then after those meetings are over, you want to stay in touch with all parties to make sure that the needs are being met, any issues that arise are being addressed properly, and